You're listening to the JJS Podcast. Up to this point, the most successful companies around the world have had entire departments made up of full-time employees dedicated to providing marketing communication support, leaving every other company without those resources at a distinct disadvantage. Well, the world has changed, and we have to change with it. That's why I'm going to take my 15 years of experience of managing marketing communication strategies for some of the biggest brands in the world and share that knowledge with you so that it can improve your business and your life. So if you're a business professional or an entrepreneur who wants to learn how to deploy the right strategies given your position and the position of the audience you're trying to reach, you're in the right place. Hey guys, welcome to the JJS Podcast. So today we're going to be talking about probably one of the most well-known corporate buzzwords there is, and that's culture. And so this has especially been a topic of discussion lately with folks trying to figure out how to engage a remote workforce or a larger remote workforce and preserve their company culture. And as I mentioned before, I've been working quite a few years in these large corporate environments, so I have quite a bit of experience. Culture is something that would routinely come up with HR when talking about employee engagement and how that impacts productivity and ultimately the overall financial performance of the organization. So I have quite a bit of experience with this. So I wanted to share 5 steps, kind of a 5-step process for shaping and reshaping a company culture. And I won't say it's easy, but it's easier to manage if you take this 5-step approach and just implement this process when trying to really deal with how you're going to improve or reshape the culture at an organization. So, and before I get into that, I want to make sure that it's something's clear. It's important to understand that the culture of a company or an organization organically emerges. And so what I mean by that is the culture is what's actually happening at that company. It's not something that can be faked or simulated or artificially manufactured. And a lot of folks who are executives who've been in corporate America for quite a few years, and I've been at places like this, a lot of them seem to believe you can do that. You can actually fake the culture and present this facade of what you want it to be or what you want the employees to think it is or any prospective employees to think it is. If you use enough smoke and mirrors and you hire the right spin doctors and all this, you can present or simulate a culture that you want. That's not the case. The culture is what's actually there. So if you're, for example, an organization where it's rife with nepotism and you have a lot of folks at the higher positions who don't know what they're doing because they're the relatives of somebody else and they were hired for that. You can't present those folks as anything other than that. You can't fake that. You can't fake their competency. And I've been at places where that was actively attempted, where they tried to hide the fact that they were, engaging in nepotism or things like that. So it's important to understand that you can't fake that kind of thing. You can only that's what the culture is of that organization. If that's the environment, the culture it's rife with nepotism and there's people in higher positions who don't know what they're doing. That's the culture of your company, whether you like it or not. And everyone's aware of that. They won't say that, right, because they want to continue getting a check, but that is the culture of the company. That's what's actually there. So it's important to understand that at the fundamental level. So when you're trying to address this issue of culture and trying to shape it or reshape it however you want it to be, the first thing you have to do is clearly define what you want that target culture state to be, right? You kind of specifically outline your North Star, where you want to be culturally as an organization, whatever it is. It's, whether you want to be, focus completely on employees and make it and have a culture where people work wherever, whenever they want, kind of this asynchronous model. That's fine. If you want to have a culture where everyone comes in and works in on-prem, and which a lot of companies are trying to really hammer, then that's one thing too. But understand what you want the target cultural state to be. What do you want it to look like? The next thing you do is then create a cultural scorecard. And this approach can be used for not just this, for a lot of different things that you want to, a lot of different programs or initiatives you want to start or release internally your organization. This same kind of process can be used for different things. But you want to create a scorecard, and there's folks you can hire, there's consultants you can hire who are experts in that, who are familiar with Kaizen and all those things that can do it for you. But you can do this yourself as well. It will take some time, but it's not incredibly difficult to figure out how to do. But you create a scorecard, a cultural scorecard, and you determine what metrics you're going to use to score folks based on. So is a metric, let's say using the previous example, the number of days in office, the number of events that the person has participated in, the number of different committees or things that they're part of internally. However you want to measure that, each of those gets a score, and that's how you'll create your overall cultural scorecard, which will determine the score against what your ideal cultural standard is. So once you create a scorecard, then you have to survey and get a pulse from the company. Now, typically, I usually highly recommend using anonymous surveys because that's when you get the most candid feedback and honest information. However, for this exercise, you won't be able to conduct the survey anonymously because of the next step that's coming after this. So you will need to capture at least their email address. And, in light of that, it's very important to be mindful of the way you frame the questions. Don't try to ask questions that are going to be too heavy for folks to answer, knowing that their identity is going to be tied to the response, because they'll be less likely to respond honestly. So try to frame the questions in such a way that they're achieving the desired result, where you're getting a reflection of, how much of a cultural alignment there is, but at the same time, nothing too intense or too heavy, because they're not going to answer it. So, and then the following step after that, once you've gathered all that data and all that feedback, then you would score each individual respondent and then give the organization an overall score based on your cultural scorecard. And once you've done that, you would then create journeys for each number. So there's a specific internal communication or employee engagement journey for the number 3s and the number 4s and the number 5s, so on and so forth. And that means they're going to get this cascade or this series of emails. And if you have the right tools in place, something like HubSpot or something of that nature, you can create workflows based on and sequences based on the actions taken throughout the journey. So, and to achieve the desired goal, right? You want to, it's not just emails, but also different initiatives or events or programs you're kicking off that's specifically addressed to this kind of, to the lower ranking scores, the lower engaged employees or whatnot. So you would create specific journeys for each one of those scores, each one of those numbers. And then the final step is to, after a year of deploying your strategy for getting folks closer to that cultural standard you want to reach, you then measure against your previous score from the year prior and see how you're doing. And the key to all this, I want to be clear that the point of this exercise is not to identify folks who aren't great cultural fit in your organization and then target them for termination or anything like that. That would be incredibly unethical, first of all. But second of all, that's idiotic in a lot of levels, because the goal is you want to get an understanding of your current culture and your current cultural state as an organization, and determine how much of a gap or a chasm there is between that and where you want to be in terms of culture. So, if you're an organization and you want to, let's say you're an employer and you want to have everyone back in the office, let's say, as an example, and you want to have everyone on premises, you could do a couple of things. One, you could just tell yourself, well, I'm only going to hire folks who are willing to come work on premises. As I've said before, I don't think that's a smart move for a number of reasons. A, you're limiting yourself now, once again, on a geographical basis in terms of your talent pool. And whereas your competitors and a lot of other companies are not doing that. They've actually eliminated that limitation, that barrier. So you're already setting yourself up for getting an overall lower quality talent pool because you've added this very potent limitation of geographical proximity. That's one. Two, you're also limiting yourself to people who are like-minded in this regard, people who want to come into the office and whatnot. And that's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship between that and talent and how talented they are in their role. So you're just limiting your options significantly by doing that, in my opinion. But that's something you could do. Or the other option is understand that that's where you want to be as a culture, as an organization, but that's not where the majority of your knowledge workforce is, and they're not aligned with that at all. They would prefer a remote or mostly remote type of arrangement, and then decide to adapt to that reality and say, well, if the important thing is having the best possible people working for me, then I have to adapt my thinking and my approach to culture in light of that fact. And if maybe it is something, if you're just committed to this idea of having people work on prem and you realize that's the reality, maybe you do things and you take measures to make it more attractive, enticing for people to work on prem. I know it sounds expensive, an expensive proposition, but a creative way to do that would be to offer childcare on premises. Companies that in the past, long before the pandemic, I encountered organizations that did that. They offered childcare on premises as a major perk for folks to want to come in and work because they've alleviated that financial burden. So that's something you could do. You could even more radical than that, which I think some employers might start doing, the bigger ones at least. You could start planning to lease a space with living quarters there as well, and offer that as an incentive for certain level of talent. If you commit to coming to work 40 hours a week on premises, one of the perks is we have on-site living quarters that are significantly discounted in terms of monthly rent or whatnot. I know that sounds radical and extreme, but I know a lot of big companies already have investments in commercial leases they can't get out of, and so not for a few years. So that might be the route you want to go. And although that may sound as a very costly proposition initially, after running the numbers in terms of retention and turnover and how that impacts productivity over the long term, it may make financial sense. I don't know, maybe not, but things like that. If that's where you want to go, if you say, okay, I've identified that the bulk of my organization would prefer to work remotely, but I don't want that. Trying to force them is only going to result in the best people leaving because they don't have to. Again, I've talked about that as well. They don't have to put up with stuff anymore they don't really like. Or you can try to get creative strategically about making it a more logical from a financial perspective for them to just come work on prem. You can find ways to do that. So, but the key is A, understanding what your culture currently is, B, understanding where you want it to be, and then C, actually taking meaningful steps to get there and to make that happen, rather than adopt this mindset where, well, I'm only going to hire people that do what I want and agree to the arrangement I want, and then I'll just I'll have HR deal with the fluffy feel good stuff in terms of culture or whatnot. That's if that's your attitude, I would recommend, and this is actually something a lot of people probably wouldn't have a problem with, I would actually recommend forgetting about culture altogether. Like, don't even attempt to have a meaningful work culture at your organization. Keep it purely transactional and just say, look, this is how we pay people to work. They come, they do their job, they leave, and that's it. If that's the tone you want to take, that would be far more preferable for a large number of people in the workforce than trying to fake it or simulate it with cupcakes and pizza parties and things like that. And I'll be candid, I'm one of them. I would much rather, if I was going to work full-time in an organization again, I would much rather they just be straight and transactional with me and say, look, we're not here to make you feel good about stuff. This is what we want. This is what we expect. This is how much it pays. Have a nice day. That really clarifies things tremendously. And so I would much rather that than feel like I'm being coddled or just placated, when really that's not, there's no real sentiment or emotion behind that. So that may be the approach you want to take. And I would recommend doing that and just forgetting about culture altogether. But don't do this thing where, I want to pretend the culture is this, and really I'm just, being cutthroat and ruthless about it. And as a result, just accumulating not even the best talented people I can that are available to me because I'm refusing to accept the reality of things. Don't do that. Identify what culture you want. Identify what culture that actually exists in the organization, and then clearly outline and define how you're going to get there. And by using this 5-step process, you'll be able to do that. So just wanted to talk about that, and I know culture is a big issue for a lot of employers and organizations right now, and a lot of workers as well. They want to try to find a place that's a good cultural fit for them and aligns with what they want, and because they have now the option and luxury to do that. I also understand that we are at the precipice of a recession, and that things are definitely going to cool off for sure in the coming months. But the flexibility and the options afforded through digital means to the workforce is kind of a permanent shift now. And so that's something we're going to have to adapt to over the long term, just in general. So really try to nail down what kind of culture you want in contrast to the culture you have, and then go from there. So just wanted to talk about that. If you're in HR or in employee engagement or in communications, hopefully you found this 5-step process beneficial, and hopefully you're able to implement it where you're at. And if you do, let me know how it goes. And as always, if depending on where you're listening, be sure to review and rate us. Let us know your thoughts. And just take care and good luck out there. Thank you for checking out this episode of the JJS Podcast. If you're watching us via YouTube, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the show. And if you're listening in through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or something like that, be sure to rate us there as well. Hope you enjoyed listening. And remember, communication without strategy is just noise. Till next time.